our member of the CRF, David Abdullah, is going to respond to the issues that she raised earlier. But this is not a one-way thing. So I'm opening up the floor to questions and issues that you want to throw into the report, and for us to take this dialogue and this discussion forward. Thanks, Suniti, for starting us off. Yes.
My name is Junior. Now, I'd like to start where, or let me make my point where. Just a minute. My name is Junior Barak. I'd like to start where the speaker ended, on the individual. And I think that if you're talking about the individual, you're talking about a citizen. And if you're talking about a citizen, you have to talk about the requirements of a citizen. Not just on what he has to contribute to the society, but also what is due to him. Now, when we talk from that perspective, we can then build the requirements of a society and then the requirements of government. It appears as though, if you take, for instance, I work in a squatter community in Borne, and there are people who cannot afford a house. They cannot afford a house. The government has even is giving them 50% out of $100,000, and they cannot afford it in terms of subsidies. They still cannot afford the house. So what is the requirement of a citizen? What does he require? How do we organize a society that the individual can feel as though he is part of the society? Now the interest is competing for what? What are the interests competing for? Isn't that the same thing that the individual wants? So these interests, who is stronger, commands a greater level of the resources of the society at the expense of some individuals. Is this the context, or is this the kind of society we want? So when we talk about interests, we have to be careful, because, and what is participation? Again, the individual. Is the individual participating in the economic development in terms of his own development? And what is the use of the society if he cannot reach his own requirements? And therefore you have crime. You know, and if I have to take care of my own requirements, then I'll steal. So we have to get these things straight. Thank you very much.
Okay, I don't want you to confuse special interest with interest, because the squatter interest is an interest, and we're talking about the interests of people. So, you know, I am assuming that is part of the reason people get together and organize themselves and offer up themselves for election, because they feel that they have a solution to that problem. How do we get housing for all? Those are the challenges of a society. Every society has finite resources, and you have to have priorities. Housing is one of the priorities. The end product is a society of people who are happy, who have all the things they need. That's perfection. That's where we want to get to. The question is, given what we have and the human intelligence that we have, how do we work these things to get us closer to that all the time? And that is where the negotiation now comes in.
Yes, I just want to say one thing in terms of, you know, the managing that. If we can try to be as pointed as possible in our comments and or questions, so that as many of us as possible can make an input. Right, Michael?
Yeah. Yes, good morning, Michael. Theodore, CRF. I think one of the other elements, I'm sorry I was not here for the beginning of the discussion, but one of the elements I think is critical to the society is the sense that people have of being victims. I think there's a sense of victimhood that pervades our society, that we do not have the power to change things in our interest. And I see that at every level. I teach at the tertiary level, and my students have this sense, even within the institution, that they don't have any power to influence what is going on. And it is very difficult, I find, in this time where you have the internet and electronic media, and you see in across the world where people power is being channeled through the electronic systems, and people come out into the streets and they have Egypt is an example of really changing their environment, changing the society. So I think that one of the issues is confidence of our people in themselves to be able to assert what they really want. Now the political parties and so on are supposed to reflect the interest, and ideally, if you have the leadership moving people along and joining them, that is the ideal situation. But I think that our own perception of ourselves is a major problem.
But you said, Michael, that even the education system, I want to suggest because of the education system continuously denies the vibrancy that we have. You know, and I don't want, that's how, we know that story, but the question is, how do we transform the education system to build self-confidence, to let people look around and see what is the history of this country, look at the survival, look at how we have come, look at how we have inherited this place, you know, and look at the things that we are creating. How can PAN be at the periphery? How could a minister of culture be talking about giving 2 private competitions $2 million and equating the PAN movement with the same thing? PAN is not even in that conversation. That should not even, PAN is our national instrument. It is something that the winner, first of all, is not even arithmetic, because the winner, so many people win. It's not just the PAN players and the managers, but the transport. You have to take the money, and half of it has to go to paying the cost of getting people to the savannah to start with, and so on. So this failure, and this is the problem and the challenge of independence that we are yet to meet, which is that we have believed we could just step into the shoes of the colonizer and into an existing framework and show how good we are at operating it, and pat ourselves in the back and say, oh, you see, we can be decent MPs too, and we can go about, and we know how to use whatever. So that challenge of transformation, of taking something, as I said at the beginning, you talk about building a supermarket, and instead you end up with you build a garage and want to know why people are not coming to buy stuff or why things are not being chilled. We need a different framework, institutional framework for independence. You cannot be operating the same framework that you operated under as something that is managed from abroad, and something where the management has been influenced by the fear of the masses, fear of people, and expect it to be functional. It is going to be dysfunctional. And of course, it has run its course, which is why we see such an institutional breakdown. But we do not have the representation, with the politics of representation, to inform the process of what is the shape of the new structure that is required for releasing those energies.
I came here to discuss to contribute to this issue about coalition governments, but I find that Suniti has covered such a wide range of the problems of politics in Trinidad and Tobago that I think the coalitional problem has become sidestepped, and some of the people are getting deeper into the root cause, and Suniti just said it, the root cause of the coalitional problem, which is tied up with the idea of political parties. Now, I have the question of representation, which Trinity points out, is inverted. It's something novel to me, but it basically, what I've been thinking all along is that political parties, as we know them here in Trinidad, are not what political parties are in advanced democracies. They are, as she points out, people represent, how do you put it? Representation comes from on top and not from below. The people, the parties do not represent the people. The people just accept what the parties decide, something like that. But what I'm saying is that this existing coalition or so-called coalition is not a coalition of parties. there are only two major political parties, if you want to, well, the two traditional parties, the PNM and the UNC in Parliament. The PP comprises the UNC and the COP. The question is, how can you define the UNC and the COP? Purely by the statistics of the number of voters that voted for them? Or is it that the number of seats that they got? Now, when you talk about a coalition, I think your late husband, Lloyd, used to talk about it, invented the phrase, a pickup side. This seems to me more like a pickup side, especially the COP. Because, and then if you merge the COP with the UNC, it's more and more pickup, because the UNC seem to have picked up individuals from anywhere, anybody that they knew, their son, their sister, their girlfriend, or whatever. Is that a political party? It seems to me as if the whole idea of politics in Trinidad is completely different from the way it is supposed to be. Okay, the other groups, the other parties, so-called parties, NJAC, they saddled, either Dukaran himself saddled himself with the NJAC, or somebody advised him that NJAC would give the party, PP, a good image. The NJAC was a lost cause a long time ago. It became obsolescent. Granger himself, Makandal Daga, had retreated into a cocoon. Why do you bring in the NJAC? The NJAC, COP, and they went under COP. They got 3 seats. They lost all 3. In the heart of Laventille and somewhere in Point Fortin. The other one, MSJ, that was a party. MSJ was a pickup side, just like that. I'm sad to say, it was very sad to see that David Abdullah, a member of the CRF, would participate in such a thing. Because there is no political party, there was no political party called MSJ. There were the oil field workers trade union, which is a trade union. And there was Phyton, which was a group of unions. And Natuk, I think, stayed out of it. All of a sudden, you find MSJ coming in as a coalition, part of a coalition. Do they represent anybody? Is there any dialogue between the members of the OWTU and MSJ?
Could we just kind of...
This is what I'm saying. The whole thing is very, very...
Because I think the idea has gotten already.
Yeah,
okay.
I want to deal with the MSJ and NJAC, because that view you're expressing is a popular view, but I don't think it's correct. And I think, however, it's popular because it looks like it's correct, because you're talking about numbers. But NJAC and MSJ are the 2 elements of the partnership that have the most to benefit from this partnership. And I'm not talking about cabinet seats here. I'm talking for having been elevated to a point of national awareness from which they ought to begin to rebuild if they understood what their interest is that they can represent. Let me deal with NJAC. There are a lot of, the PNM does not represent the African Trinidadian. If they did, we would see a different picture in Laventille. We would see a different picture in Morva. We would see the Orisha community represented differently, and so on. What those are interests. It is the notion. Now, this is why I'm saying I'm glad this audience is small, because I'm really experimenting with my ideas here. This notion that the PNM is a black party, an African party, I think is erroneous. Because where is the tradition and the culture of the African peoples represented in that party? And that's why it's an Afro-Saxon party. And Patrick Manning could find no common ground with Africans in the party. Kamla Prasad Bisesa has found even more than he has found, and the question is that there is a large community of African Trinidadians whose culture has been denied by the Afro-Saxon community, by the Afro-Saxon